Hello and welcome back to the Irish Film London podcast season 2. I'm your host Niamh Brannigan and I am joined with Gerry Maguire. How are you this week, Gerry?
I'm really well, Niamh. Thank you very much. I'm enjoying the good weather that's come back to London.
Good. Well, this week is a little bit more chill. It's a little bit quieter in regards to releases and kind of film news because I think the summer everyone's kind of gearing up for festival season, especially in Ireland.
Yes.
So that's already kicked off. There was Fastnet at the weekend, and you were telling me about Achill Island Film Fleadh as well. That sounded lovely.
Yeah, so Achill Island's first film festival took place in the last couple of weeks. Really positive news and reviews coming out of that. It sounds like a really cool little event and we hope it returns in years to come. But yeah, you're right, it's the start of festival season now really. So I think distributors and filmmakers and stuff are kind of probably waiting a little bit. Like when the sun's out, people don't normally go to the cinema very much, and I think distributors plan for that. So it's maybe a bit of a quieter time.
Yeah, definitely. And there was also the other festival you were telling me about that I had never heard of before was the Docks Ireland Festival. Yeah,
so Docks Ireland is in its third or fourth year, I think. It's based in Belfast. It's kind of an offshoot of the Belfast Film Festival, or it shares some of the same theme. But it started with a bang. It's made a really big impact in the few years it's been around. It's both a documentary film festival and a marketplace where filmmakers go and pitch their projects. But they've just announced their festival program for this year. Looks great. Really, really strong program. Loads of brilliant Irish and international documentaries involved there. I'm really looking forward to that.
Brilliant. And then in regards to festivals, it's not necessarily, on the same level as Achill Island and Fastnet Festival, but Cannes went down really well. And the Irish films that were at the Cannes Film Festival went down really well. God's Own Creatures and Aftersun, which I'm so excited to see those. It's always, I think Cannes kind of has a reputation for having tough audiences, so I think if you can get through those, then you're flying it. Yeah,
so both of those have Paul Mescal in them. We talked about them a little bit last time, I think, but yeah, they both got really, really well received. There's a huge number of Irish films which were represented at Cannes, between the marketplace and the ones that were on display in the Irish Pavilion and the ones that were in the various competitions and selections and so on. So yeah, we had a good wee bit of representation there.
And how do we feel about standing ovations at Cannes?
That was became a sort of a meme at Cannes. Like one film got a 4-minute or 5-minute standing ovation, and then the next one got the Top Gun got like an 8-minute standing ovation, and then
so I think Top Gun was 6 minutes, and then very bizarrely Elvis was 12.
That's the new Baz Luhrmann one, right?
Yeah, I'd just be exhausted. I'd be like my hands would be falling off me from clapping, there's showing your appreciation, and then there's like I'd love to work in the cinema and like flick on and off the lights,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's a very good marketing thing, though, I have to say, because now I didn't really have an interest in going to see Elvis, the new Baz Luhrmann film, but now I'm like, okay, I'm interested to go and see it now. And I have heard fab things about Top Gun, though. I have.
Oh yeah. I've heard really, really good things from people who I didn't expect to be into it, but all the film programmers that I follow whose views I really respect, they've all almost universally said it's great crack and that it's quite an achievement for a film. A lot of people talking about award stuff for Tom Cruise for that. Yeah, loads of stuff, and there's a lot of people suggesting big awards for the film itself, Oscars and stuff like this. Which, like, that Top Gun film, like, my relationship to it is it's the one trailer I saw incessantly at the cinema for about 2.5 years. I just can't wait for it to be out, so the trailer is gone. It's taking up so much space in my brain, rent free, and I just want it gone. But apparently it's really, really good. Like, I have to put that.
We'll have to go and chat about it on the next one. So we were talking about it in our last intro about IFL going on tour. It's finally coming upon us. So IFL are hitting Glasgow, Liverpool, Manchester and Newcastle.
Yep.
Amazing.
That's it. you've done that for me. Yeah,
brilliant.
That's it. Yeah.
So if you're from any of those places and you're listening, definitely go and support the guys and head down to the IFL events. They're going to be great.
Yeah.
And then also you were saying submissions for IFL Festival are just the best ever.
I mean, we have just closed our submissions for the final season of Irish Film from Home, and in the meantime we've got submissions open for the Irish Film Festival London in November. So this week gone by, we met our early bird deadline. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, you get to submit for cheaper if you submit early. That's the early bird deadline. We're now into the regular submission period. At this stage, for any other year, we have smashed the submission numbers. Like, we've got more submissions in now at this than at any other year at this stage, and that should be a projection of us getting the most submissions at the end of the submission period ever. So I'm really, really, really pleased about this. It means that there's lots and lots of new Irish films out there that we can look at, and it means that the festival in November is going to be really, really strong, really, because we've got such a great selection to choose from.
Amazing. That's so exciting.
Yeah, keep them coming. filmfreeway.com/Irish Film Festival London. Get your submissions in. The regular deadline closes on, I think, the 11th of July, and then there's a late deadline for any latecomers whose films aren't finished or who haven't got round to it yet or whatever. Late deadline does get more expensive, so it's really worth your while to try and push and get that into us now. As for the tour, if anyone is in Glasgow, we are at the CCA, the Centre for Contemporary Arts, this weekend. Vivian Dick's New York Our Time is on Friday evening. Tygo O'Sullivan's To the Moon is on Saturday evening. Come down and join us there. There are still tickets available for both of those, but I'm sure that they will be going fast. Liverpool, we'll probably chat to you about that in the meantime, but we are going to be at FACT in Liverpool on the 8th of June. And then Manchester, we are at Home in Manchester, a brilliant venue, on the 14th with New York Our Time, and the 20th, Tuesday the 20th, I think it is, with To the Moon. And then hopefully we're in Newcastle with New York Our Time again on Wednesday 29th. That one's not quite on sale yet, but save the date.
Amazing, brilliant. I can't wait to hear all about that. And then another film along with Top Gun, obviously, that we both have to go and see and then chat about is Men is now out with Jessie Buckley, which looks incredible. We were chatting about that in our last chat as well, so I think that's going to be really, really great.
There's some initial reviews out for that, and they're quite positive. Like, I think there's some people who are not so into the political discourse around the male-female thing that's going on in there. Like, Jessie Buckley is a lead character who is, I guess you would call her like an archetypal traumatized woman kind of character. So there's a few like horror thriller tropes going on in there, but it is an Alex Garland film. He's made some very high concept sci-fi. I don't think that people should be going into it expecting it to be like an all men are evil thing. I think there's going to be a lot more going on under the surface there. What I have heard from people like Edgar Wright were saying this week that the VFX is really, really incredible, and that Alex Garland has actually, he'll push your expectations in the right direction. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see as well the reviews that aren't so great if they're written by men or women.
Ooh, yes, good point. Hadn't considered that.
Yeah, I have heard a few things that if you have a delicate ego as a man, don't go and see it.
There's another bit of news I want to drop in as well, actually.
Go for it. So
there was another announcement today which I think is newsworthy in terms of including in the podcast news, but some cinemas in London are about to get cheaper to attend.
No way.
What?
Unreal.
So earlier on today, there was a release in the trades from Curzon. They have completely restructured their prices, and their prices are about to drop in line with what they say is a very much changed customer experience in the current climate. So basically they're trying to adjust their prices so that it's more affordable for most people. But this is, that's something I feel really strongly about. Like, I've worked with Curzon Cinemas in London for a long time. They've got really beautiful venues that they've invested a lot of money into across the country, but for a long time going to a place like Curzon, not just Curzon, but like central London cinemas, like especially the Leicester Square venues, it's not just a case of pay your ticket and have a good time. Like, especially if you want to go to a Leicester Square show.
Oh my God, so expensive.
Yeah, it's like an event cinema experience. It's experiential and all that kind of stuff. So it's the guts of 20 quid for your cinema ticket, probably the same for your refreshments and your popcorn and all that kind of stuff. Factor in the travel and you're talking about, it's the guts of 50 quid to go and see a film. And that's fine, and I to an extent justifiable if you're a Leicester Square venue and you want to go for the big experience thing. Like, they did a Top Gun red carpet thing in Leicester Square last week or the week before last. There was an actual fighter jet there, that you could get your picture taken with and stuff. That kind of stuff, that's really cool. And if you're going to do that, do it in Leicester Square. Absolutely, it's great. It's great crack, and there's IMAX and luxury seats and all that kind of stuff. But that prices a lot of people out. Like, I mean, when you're going out to the cinema, Niamh, are you? And if I told you that you could go out and see Men with Jessie Buckley in it, but it's going to cost you, your ticket's going to cost you 20 quid on its own, are you going to see that film?
I mean, it would definitely deter me away from wanting to run out the door and not waiting for it to come on all of the streaming services that we have in our homes,
That's exactly the thing. So this price drop's really encouraging. And just to give you an idea of how much it is.
Now, Jessie, obviously I love you, just in case you're listening. Obviously I'm going to go and see it.
Yeah, we're going to go see it.
Yeah.
To give you an idea of what the price drop looks like, so the standard price in a place like Curzon Bloomsbury, which is in central London, just south of King's Cross, really lovely cinema, is about £17.50 for a standard ticket price at present. That's going to go down to about a tenner, and cheaper than that with discounts for like students and members and stuff like that. So they're actually in some cases they're cutting their ticket price in half.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, and for a number of reasons though, like one, for smaller films, like you say, like films like Top Gun or Marvel films, in Leicester Squares, that's fine. But also, even when you think about it, like big Marvel films and all that kind of stuff in Leicester Square cinemas, but if they're that expensive, they're gonna deter away from families going, because families aren't, you know what I mean? So it actually doesn't really serve a lot of people. So I just think I think because it's gotten to a point now, because the price of living in London and Dublin and everything is just getting worse and higher. Going to the theatre, going to the cinema is just becoming more and more of a luxury,
Totally. And we don't want it to be a luxury, we want it to be accessible to everyone. So this is like universally good news, I think.
That's amazing. That's so great.
And what's really interesting is that the ecosystem for cinemas in a place like London, well, across the UK in general, really, but it's kind of focused on London. Those indie art house venues, they're all very much connected, and what will be really interesting will be to see whether Picture House or another of the chains like View or someone like that follow suit, whether they drop things or make an offer to follow in their footsteps of Curzon.
Fingers crossed. That's brilliant news. That's a lovely note to finish our chat on. Really, really nice. So I had gorgeous chats this week with Alison Oliver, who plays Frances in Conversation with Friends. Our patron Lenny Abramson directed kind of a block of these episodes, and it's just such a gorgeous series. And I hope you all enjoy our chats. And thank you so much, Gerry. I will chat to you very soon.
Nice one, Niamh. Chat to you soon.
Bye. If you're part of the regular Irish Film London audience or want to get more from your experience, consider joining our growing family of members for a range of exciting benefits. Irish Film London is a non-for-profit organisation. Our mission is to promote the best new Irish film to audiences all over the UK, and with the help of this podcast, the world. If you become a festival friend or a festival champion, you get perks like discounted tickets for films and events, free access to Irish Film from Home films, and invites to networking events and so much more. So check it out now. Welcome, Alison, to the Irish Film London podcast. Thank you so much for coming on to chat to me today. Such a joy to have you on. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
No worries at all. So chuffed to have you on. So let's go right back. Let's go back to the beginning. How did conversations with friends come into your life first?
I'd read the book before I kind of auditioned or anything, and was like so obsessed with it and so moved by it, like so many people. And yeah, it was just kind of like in my brain then as one of my favorite novels. And then funnily enough, like a couple of months later then an audition tape came in for the series. So it was kind of funny to have read the book and you know, I guess Sally's writing has that kind of feel to it, that they are kind of real people. Like it's so descriptive that you really feel like they exist in the world. And so or their experience of life was like realer than ours or something, that I just felt like they were real people, and so it was a really interesting thing to kind of then go and audition to be in it.
And I mean, so relatable because you also went to Trinity as well. So, you know, not much of a far stretch, I guess, in a way, which is really, really cool. But what was the kind of process like? So you did a tape, and then did you have to do in-person auditions? Were there any kind of chemistry tests or?
Yeah, I think my first self-tape was like summer of 2020. So it was like still kind of quite lockdown-y. So I did a tape, and then I had about maybe a month later, I did like or maybe 2 weeks later or something, I did like a Zoom interview with Lenny. And then I had audition in person then for like my last round. And yeah, and then it was only kind of after that I'd been cast did I do like chemistry reads with like Sasha and Jemima for their roles. And it was such an interesting thing for me to be on the other side of that. And they both kind of, like, when I saw them audition, it's so interesting because it's just so evident, like you kind of, without any kind of discussion, I just knew that they were going to be those roles. So it was amazing for me to actually get to experience that side and see that.
So you were cast, and then the casting kind of happened around you in a way, was it? Like, did you kind of read with loads of other actors, or did they kind of have it all kind of picked out of who they wanted you to read with?
I think, so I think like after I'd done my audition in person with Lenny, I didn't hear back for a while. And I think during that time, you know, I think Lenny was seeing like people for Nick, and I know that like he kind of immediately when he saw Joe, he was totally sold on Joe being Nick and stuff. So I think Lenny does a brilliant thing where I think he kind of has to see all these, like everyone in his head first before he's kind of like yes, because all of those relationships kind of inform each other and they all need to kind of flow, I guess. So I think when I had been cast, like a couple of days later, Joe had been offered Nick. And then I then got to be a part of reading with the different people auditioning for Bobby and Melissa. But from like the moment that myself and Joe were cast, we were like straight away on Zooms chatting loads. And because of the pandemic, we actually had about 6 months to prepare. And so we had like so much contact during that time, whether it was like, you know, on a Zoom like this with Lenny chatting about it or just chatting ourselves. So by the time we actually all came to film it, we all knew each other quite well, which is, I think, maybe can sometimes be rare. And even in addition to that, like you know, as the new kind of drafts were coming in and they were developing the scripts further and further, like we were sent those new drafts and we were kind of asked our kind of thoughts on them, which was amazing, like, and so collaborative that we were so kind of involved in all of it. And so, yeah, it was, I feel like that whole time was like a period in itself, like all of the stuff before we actually even started filming. And so it was really, yeah, it was brilliant.
Those 6 months, was that because, were they kind of scheduled for that reason, or was that like because of COVID, or?
It was because of COVID. So like, I think
Right.
we were scheduled to start maybe November 2020, and then it went to January, and then to February, and then it was just like, do you remember like January of 2021, and it was like the highest it had ever been.
Mhm.
I think it was just a case of like, if we start, we'll probably have to stop.
Yeah.
And so almost trying to just go, if we just leave it till closer to the summer, we'll probably just get a run in and be able to manage much better. And I'm glad we did that, because I think it's one of those shows, or I guess stories, that you kind of just want to stay in it once you start.
Absolutely. I'd say it would be really disorientating, kind of dropping in and out, and just even continuity and momentum and everything as well.
Exactly. So yeah, I think they definitely made the right call, kind of waiting till summer. And also it's always nice, I think, to shoot in the summer, because a lot of the stuff was, it's funny actually, the story, like in the book, we actually, it's the same kind of seasonal time, like it starts kind of at the end of exams and then links around back to Christmas, and we finished like October, I think. So yeah,
It was meant to be.
it was meant to be, exactly.
But also as well, like, as you say, that's so rare that you would get that kind of prep time, you know, that's such a kind of a theater thing, you know, is all these rehearsals and all that kind of bonding with cast, whereas like with TV and film, you're just kind of, you're straight in, you got to have the chemistry straight away, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that's really, that's brilliant, and obviously did really work out, and really added to the relationships that you guys had, that we could definitely see on screen. And what I love about this series is how it deals with the topic of, can you love more than one person, and kind of the shame, I guess, in a way, that can go along with that topic. And I think especially more recently, people are beginning to open up a bit more about monogamous relationships, and kind of feels like a perfect time for conversations with friends, you know, and like, excuse the pun, the conversation around that topic. So what was that like, kind of diving into that kind of subject matter, and how important was that to get that across?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because like, I think like it's, I guess with Sally as well, like I never feel like she's trying to teach anyone a lesson or any of that kind of stuff. She's so intelligent and kind of just like winds these ideas, like, and wraps them up in a character's narrative, or it's just a part of their life. And so in a sense, like, I think when you see Frances kind of embark on this affair, and then also kind of things of her past with Bobby are being kind of unearthed, like it just kind of presents itself to her of like, oh, I'm in love with two people, like that is just the case for me. And similar to Nick with Frances and Melissa. And I think like what I learned from it, or what I thought was really interesting, was actually the feeling is incredibly simple. Like I have love for two people, but it's all of the kind of cultural messaging, or the kind of constructs that we have been taught since, like, you know, like we were born, that like monogamous relationships are kind of the way. It's all of that what makes it really complicated. And it's really interesting to hear you say shame, because I think it's kind of like anything that kind of goes against the grain, or goes against what we're taught is normal or kind of expected or the way to be, is there's always kind of shame or backlash, or in any being different, I guess. And so I think being a part of something that feels quite open and fluid and kind of welcoming to different forms of loving each other, I just think is really brilliant, and definitely was exciting for me to explore that idea.
I think it's just so great to start to see that kind of stuff now on our screens. Like the reason, and I mean, people who aren't Irish who are listening to this mightn't understand the Irish guilt aspect of it, the Catholic Irish guilt of it. But I mean, like, you know, with divorce being illegal for years, you
Yeah.
know, and like, let alone being able to be in a position where you feel comfortable enough and confident enough to be like that. I have love for two people, and I just think it's so great that like we're just growing and developing in that way, that we can even just start talking about it, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And for like audiences to look at scenarios or characters like this and go, oh, you know, it's not the end of the world if this is how somebody is choosing to live their life, or is not even choosing to feel, but just how they feel. And I think it's a really great series for loads of reasons, but for that particular one for sure. Like the scene when you guys are even just all sitting in the pub when you meet your friend's new girlfriend, and you're all talking about, you know, kind of the politics that go around, you know, being exclusive, and it's just really good conversations to have. And it is like, oh, I can see me and my friends sitting around talking like that as well, you know, and it's really nice to see that reflected on screen for sure.
Yeah.
And it's always hard to do a film or a TV show that's based off a book, because people create their own images and opinions of characters in their heads. So did you feel the pressure from that, or were you able to just put it out of your head and go, okay, I'm going to focus on Frances and being in that world? Or, you know, did those kind of pressures or anything, anxiety kind of that creep in at any point throughout the shooting?
I think, yeah, I mean, maybe more so when I was auditioning, in the sense of like that, because I kind of felt like she was a real person. I was like, and felt quite different to me in many ways, that I was kind of like, how am I going to step inside that? And I think like I guess the way the book is written, like her tone is so apparent, like it's almost like you can hear her voice, or the way that she would kind of phrase things, or I don't know, she felt so clear to me, that I guess, and all her kind of characters do, that I guess just trusting that if you know, if you really kind of follow that, and try and just put yourself inside of that, whatever that is, that hopefully, you know, and I guess like, I think you get a lot of confidence, or certainly I did, from like Lenny giving me the part, that I suppose, like, that he kind of believed that I could do it. I was like, okay, I'll find, you know, through this book, or through all of the different discussions that I would be having with him or the rest of the cast, I guess you find your way in. But in terms of like the pressures that might bring, like, I think definitely, and I definitely felt like nervous about that. But I think after a while, or certainly when we started filming, it's almost like you kind of just get so wrapped up in actually the story you're telling, and all of the different elements that brings, or the things that you're preparing for, thinking about, that in a way I kind of just tried to focus my energy into, you know, just trying to take each day as it comes, rather than maybe thinking of what it will be when it comes out, and what people might feel is Frances or isn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think two things is that, like, one, also it's important to remember that it's based off the novel, you know what I mean? Because there's different writers for different episodes as well, which is really important to note, is that it is based off, you know, it's never going to be word for word, you know, scene for scene from the book. And then also one thing that you said there that I really loved, that I'd want to pick up on, especially for any actors listening, is that thing of just trusting that your director and, you know, your producer, your casting team, that like, well, you've been given this part because they trust you with it. And I mean, if you start doubting that, then you're technically doubting them. And I mean, who can doubt Lenny Abramson? So so I think that's a really good thing for people, especially actors or creatives, who might kind of suffer from, what is that, you know, that syndrome, that kind of exactly,
Yeah.
imposter syndrome, and it's like, well, no, I was given this and trusted with this for a reason, so just do it and focus on it, which you did beautifully. So what's kind of one thing as an actor, kind of about your craft, I guess, in a way, that you've learned from conversation with friends that you'll bring with you onto your next project?
Um, that's a really interesting question, because I think, yeah, like I definitely learned so much stuff, and I think maybe one thing that I suppose stood out to me quite a bit was like how much, no matter how much you kind of prepare or really think about it or talk about it, like you really just don't know what's going to happen or how you're going to feel or how it's going to be until you're literally there on the day, in your clothes, in the room, like with the people you're doing the scene with. Like, I think there was so much source material and so much time to prepare that, like, sometimes you can be tempted to kind of almost have it figured out before you even start. And I think as I went on, I really just learned through, like, the amazing direction and guidance by Lenny and the people that I was working with, who were all so amazing, like, to kind of just really just let go and kind of just really respond to the moment and to the environment that you're in on that day, and the scene plays out in the way it plays out because that's how it was on the day. And like that can be really freeing, actually, and kind of bring about, yeah, things that you had no idea were going to happen. And I would say that was something that was a really big learning experience for me, and I guess will try and bring with me a lot, is just to really learn to let go, I think, when coming to stuff, because majority of the time when you do that, actually it's the stuff that you really didn't expect or know would come, ends up being kind of the most exciting things, or the most kind of spontaneous things, which not only for an actor, but I think also for an audience is
And I think, like, you can really only learn and get better at what you do when you're in it. You can really only do, as you say, so much preparing, but
yeah,
really at the end of the day, when you're there and you're in it, that's when you're learning and you're
yeah,
growing as a performer. And I think especially for you, I mean, straight from university, straight from the Lear, how was that kind of, did you find it daunting, or how are you able to kind of stay grounded in that sense, to kind of come straight out of drama school and into such a big kind of production, I guess, in a way, with like such big production value and names and that kind of thing? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, like initially when I was cast, I was just like like just so shocked and was like, what? And I think, like, I was surrounded by people who, like, not only in kind of the like Lenny and the cast, but also, like, the people I went to college with, and my friends, like, just the most kind of like encouraging, supportive, like lovely people, that I was just so lucky in that sense, that like, although I was kind of nervous and kind of had this feeling of like, how the hell am I going to do this, that I just had so much encouragement. And I think that actually really helped me, and that, in a sense, you're like, I kind of after a while was like, yeah, but like, that's what I'm trying to do. I have been trying to get a job, and although this feels massive and kind of can be scary, like, also I've been dying to kind of put into practice what I've been learning for the last 4 years in college. And so I was kind of just raring to go at the same time, and those two things, I think, kind of really just helped me focus on what I wanted to do with it, or maybe, how I wanted to approach it. And I think like it's similar to you know, playing the character in general, or any kind of pressures that brings in itself. I often find that stuff comes first, and then you kind of just really you kind of get lost in, you know, the kind of work of it, or all the stuff that you're trying to kind of do.
Yeah, I guess it's your job now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we, Alison and I have a few mutual friends, and I remember hearing that you were going to be in conversations, and a few of our mutual friends saying, like, yeah, Alison's going to be the lead in Conversation with Friends, but there was no kind of surprise element there, which I actually really loved, because
Oh.
everyone was just everyone just knew it was in safe hands. Do you know what I mean? There was no kind of, it was like, yeah, of course that was going to happen. So, which is also quite nice as well, I think, to note. So obviously there's loads of really beautiful, I want to add, intimate scenes in Conversation with Friends. And I think it's so great now that it's such a requirement to have an intimacy coordinator on set. How helpful was it knowing that, like, you had a person there with you going through, I guess you would call it choreography in a way, like, and could you imagine like not having one, and like how important is it, you know?
Yeah, I'm like so important. Like and it's so mad that it's still such a like a relatively new thing, because I think in a sense it's actually really like efficient as well. Like just having, you know, because obviously the nature of it is it's a vulnerable position to be in, and it's also like, you know, it can bring about embarrassment or any of those things. And I think just having someone coming in and choreographing it like you would a stunt or fight or whatever it is, like it actually, in a sense, as well as kind of protects you and all of those things, like it's also very like, you know, time efficient, like, because like she will choreograph, I guess, so we worked with Ida O'Brien, who did Normal People as well, and she'll kind of come in and you'll chat about the intimate scene with herself and Lenny and whoever the scene is with, and I guess what story you're trying to tell with this intimate scene, and kind of what phase in their intimate relationship are they at. Is it like the first time, or like after an argument, or, you know, what is the quality of it, and then she'll kind of you know, try out different kind of shapes of how you want to tell that story, and guide you through that, and everything is choreographed, so that when you come to kind of do it on the day, like, you know, everything that's going to happen, so you're able to just play out, I guess, the characters you know, trajectory in that moment, or what they're going through, or how they're feeling about it, rather than kind of worrying, oh no, what's going to happen next, and where's the camera, and am I being protected? And, you know, it's all kind of planned. And so that, like, if you're, say, filming the scene and you need to go back, or something like that, like there's different beats or kind of phases of, say, the intimate like the intimate scene, that you can just kind of jump back to, and it's not, you know, it just is very kind of well kind of organized, I guess, that you can just approach it like you would a fight, or any of those things. And I just think that's it's kind of this, I think that's the standard, you know, that I think is set now for how those scenes are approached, and I feel very lucky that that was my first experience of doing it, intimate scenes, that it was kind of handled that respectfully and that well, and that's kind of now, you know, what I know to be how
I
they
think
should
it's fantastic that like the crew, like Element and, you know, Lenny, and anything like with Normal People and Conversations has set this bar now,
yeah
because that's just what it should be and should
yeah
always be, you know.
yeah
I think it's so
yeah
important, and that's so great that you had that experience, because I can only imagine that so many people haven't. And I just think it's so great from, like, I mean, this should have been obviously a thing years ago, but I just think it's so great now that it's it's completely a requirement now, you know, which I just think is so important. So that's really, really nice to hear. So you guys kind of did the one thing I do want to say though, before I get into I want to chat about the two directors, the switch up, is because they did this as well in Normal People. But one thing I do want to say is, like, for anyone who hasn't watched it yet, I just think it's so important to look at Conversations with Friends completely separately to Normal People. I think I mean, I get it where people might go, oh, you know, same kind of, you know, the band's back together kind of thing, you know, with Sally and Lenny and all that kind of stuff. But it's a completely different story with different characters and different scenarios, and I just think to separate them is really, really important in order to enjoy them, actually. Completely different characters and all that kind of stuff, and I just wanted to point that out. But how was it working with so Lenny Abramson directed the kind of first block of episodes, and then Leanne Wellham, am I saying that correctly, directed the last few. So I imagine that could have been disorientating, kind of getting used to one director and like their style and then it kind of switching up, or did it blend quite nicely? What was that like?
Yeah, I think Lenny did episodes 1 to 5, and then he actually came back and did 11 and 12. So Leanne took like the middle section of the story, and that was always the case from the beginning. And like, I think I actually thought it was, you know, I thought it was brilliant because in a sense, like even time wise, like Lenny being able to do his, like he did, I think the first 3 and the last 2 within kind of like, I guess, block 1, and then Leanne came in and did 6 to 10, and then at the end we all went to Croatia and did 4 and 5, and that was with Lenny. And so even, yeah, like a time thing that Lenny could do those episodes, and then he would kind of go into the edit, and then Leanne would kind of come in.
Gotcha, yeah.
And so like even for like the turnover for the show coming out, like it's because there's a lot to it, and I think a director doing all 12 of that, like the show would probably come out like next year.
And being involved in the edit as well, yeah.
Yeah. But like Leanne, I absolutely loved working with Leanne. She's so special, and she's so like, she's just amazing at kind of really giving you the space to do anything, and will kind of come in and I thought it was really interesting actually starting it off with Lenny, who I guess had cast us, and we spent that kind of time preparing, chatting with him a lot, and that there was kind of this lovely thing. I think when Leanne came in, it was kind of like fresh eyes in a sense, and I just remember having loads of chats with her, like when she first came in, and she was like, oh, because you know, like this about Francis, and I was like, oh my god, yeah, like I didn't even, you know, things that kind of I kind of knew ages ago, and almost kind of went
needed a refresher.
Yeah, and she yeah, I just loved working with her, and she kind of, I guess her part when she's coming in is the second block. I always say, I think, is, you know, the consequences of the first block. It's kind of once Bobby, sorry, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but like once Bobby, you know, finds out about the affair, and all of the relationships are kind of being reestablished because Nick and Francis have decided to kind of continue this affair, you know, in a more kind of serious way. And so she's kind of, when Leanne was coming in, she was looking at that and reestablishing those moments, and yeah, she's just such an incredible director, and was such a big fan of the book as well, that there was always this feeling of like, oh, I can't believe we're doing this and stuff, which was really fun. And then like working with Lenny was just, I mean, like epic. He really is just so gifted and so intelligent and so talented, but also like so kind and generous. And I think that's a massive part of why he is so incredible, I think, is because like with all his kind of, I guess, talents and gifts, like he really approaches everything with such a kind of collaborative, equal approach, and really, really puts you at ease, and really involves you in the whole process, and has so much respect and interest in what you think or what you might want to do at the moment, and is also like hilarious and just creates just the most wonderful environment. That I think they were both just such, like amazing people to work with. That kind of going in between the two of them, I really enjoyed. And I guess because Sally, like the story has such a distinct tone or feel to it, that even if there's kind of different directors, there's always that kind of book to return to, or that kind of base level of the world that we're in. But I certainly feel like that kind of crossover is seamless, because they both were working from the same kind of world or material, and I just think they're both so amazing. So I was lucky to work with both of them.
It sounded super kind of collaborative, which is really, really cool, and like kind of rare for sometimes big budget stuff, sometimes it's all about the time and the money, and they don't really have the time or the that kind of mindset for kind of collaborating and asking what do you think. And so that's really, really nice to hear that was definitely a huge factor on set.
Yeah, definitely. And I loved that element of it, and certainly felt new to me, like, us being involved in like them sending us the drafts and asking our opinions, and then also like on the day, like shooting a scene, like the producers would be, could be just as much involved in what happens as a moment as the actors. And I loved that kind of real collaboration of that we're all working together to make this thing the best that it can be, and that everyone's kind of role or whatever it is kind of informs each other.
Absolutely. And I'd really love to chat about Frances's kind of storyline of when she goes into hospital and the pain that she goes through. So after hours on the bathroom floor and trips to the hospital, we finally learned that she suffers from endometriosis, which is a chronic condition. And I was looking it up earlier. It's because I knew it was common, but it's a chronic condition currently affecting approximately 190 million women worldwide. And it's just not talked about or discussed enough at all. So I was delighted to see some sort of representation on screen. And I think it was actually a perfect representation, in the sense of it takes us so long to get to that result for Frances. It's always oh no, it's just really bad period pains, or are you sure you're not pregnant, or all of these kinds of things before it has to get really, really bad before we can even get anywhere looking into the treatment or what women can do for it. So what was it like dealing with that kind of subject matter and shooting it as well, and kind of how important was that for you to be involved in that kind of a storyline for young women?
Yeah, like I think also, like with Frances's story, in a sense, like she actually on average actually gets a really quick diagnosis. Like there are some people that are waiting for a diagnosis for about 10 years. And I think it's true of some people do get them quicker than others, and some doctors are able to spot it quicker. But I think it's such a complicated thing, because as you say, it's not talked about enough, and I think like 1 in 10 women in every country have it, and yet it's kind of it's like this thing of, I remember reading online like this woman who had endometriosis, and she was saying how, because that wasn't a thing that she'd ever heard of or knew existed, she thought her periods were the same as everyone else's, but she just wasn't strong enough to deal with it. And so I think, like, you know, that kind of lack of discussion not only, you know, doesn't give you an answer to your problem, but also it kind of, yeah, makes you feel like you can't handle things, or that there's something wrong with you, but there's no kind of reason for it. And I think a lot of women definitely feel a sense of, yes, closure, or not closure, but like, you know, when you get an answer to something that's been paining you for so long, like that has a relief in itself. But also, you know, some of the effects of endometriosis can sometimes be infertility. And so that is also like, you know, a whole other thing in itself that people have to deal with. And it's not the case for every person who has endometriosis, but it is kind of an effect of it. And I think coming to play that and to, I guess, represent that did feel like a really big responsibility, because, yeah, as we say, so many people deal with it. And I think, like, it's a chronic pain disease, and so it's incredibly painful for so many people, and debilitating, like, you know, and I think when we were shooting it and talking about how we wanted to kind of portray it, she goes into such depth in the book about the kind of quality of pain, and how, you know, just how awful it is. So we kind of would always go a bit more, I think, when we were shooting it, and certainly, like, in episode 6, doing all of that stuff with Leanne, like, we just kind of felt like, oh yeah, I guess this moment has to be significantly worse than anything she's experienced before, and it's kind of a shift in her that starts that kind of looking for answers of what's happening to my body. And I guess from that moment on, we kind of wanted to feel like that there's also a shift in Frances's mood, and that there is something literally pulling her down that is unlinked to everything that's happening with all of the other stuff in her life and her relationships and everything that she's going through. And I guess, you know, the feeling that when you have endometriosis, like, even when you're not on your period, like, it's always with you, and it's always something that you are dealing with. And I like how in our story you know, are watching this person experience life and its coming of age and all these different relationships. So it's not as such a story about a girl with endometriosis. It's a story about, you know, these people, but, you know, she has endometriosis alongside all of the different stuff that she's dealing with in her life. And that's the case in reality. You know, people have to deal with this day to day, but they also have to go about their lives and live their lives. And so I think all of those things were just really important to us to kind of get right and feel authentic to people who have it, and then also people who don't, and hopefully can learn from that in some way. So I felt, yeah, a really big responsibility, but also I feel lucky to be a part of representing that as well. So
absolutely, I think it's just so important, especially for younger girls as well, like that, who might be going through it exactly as you say, and think like, oh, but that's just, you know, that's just me, you know, and actually no, there is something wrong, and it's just so great to have a representation of it on screen, for sure. And one thing that I would love to ask you is, what would you like viewers to kind of take away from watching Conversations with Friends?
I mean, like, I guess there's so many things you can take away from it, and our version of the story, I think, is it's very thoughtful and quiet, and it's slower in pace to, I think, a lot of things that you see on TV, and in a sense you kind of are getting these studies of people almost like you're with them in real time. And so just like even narratively, like just to be, you know, moved or compelled by watching human behavior and kind of watching these different people go through things in their lives. And just, yeah, to find the story is kind of moving and as interesting as I did when I read it. But also I think, like, you know, there, one of the things that definitely stood out to me when I read it was just this kind of real female drive going through the story, whether it's kind of intense female friendships or female pain or just the female experience. I think that is a really big part of the story. And I guess, yeah, I think that's something I really took from it. And I always think seeing more things about that is always great. So, yeah.
Well, you just saying there about being moved and compelled by your guys' story. One thing, I don't know why, but one thing for me in conversation with friends was Frances's relationship with her dad. Um, it's not necessarily a big storyline in it. It's, you know, it's not a huge chunk or anything, but every scene that you guys had together or interaction or anything just felt so visceral for me. And I think it was because as well, you know, we don't really see representations of those kinds of relationships. You know, it's either like a father and daughter that's really, really close, or, you know, the father's not in their life. Whereas Frances's dad is in her life, but also might as well not be as well in another way. And one thing as well, I just think Tommy Tiernan is just so beautiful, such a stunning actor. So what was it like kind of playing those scenes with such a big personality, but actually his character is kind of so insular and like that, as you say, it's a quieter story. And you know, what was that kind of dynamic like, and did you guys have much time together beforehand, or you know, was there any prep or chat about the dynamic or the relationship there?
Yeah, I think that relationship is so pivotal to Frances's story and a really big part of why she is the way she is. I think myself and Tommy met and had a rehearsal with Lenny before we started and just chatted a lot about backstory really and what that relationship is before we come to meet it in the story. I think it goes into a lot of detail in the book about, you know, he's struggled with alcoholism for quite a while now, and I think growing up she kind of had to decide from a young age how she wanted to respond to that, and whether she, you know, wanted to kind of I guess make him be, try to get him to be kinder to her and be more kind of a part of his life, or I guess develop this protective shield around her that, you know, she would call this kind of coldness that I guess wouldn't let him in. So whether he was kind of trying to reach out or trying to hurt her, if she had this kind of wall, she was untouchable. And I think that's exactly what she takes into her later life, and why she kind of can't let life in sometimes, or kind of becomes quite guarded and withholding when she feels she's threatened in some way. But I think, you know, we talked a lot about when that all started and how it developed and what his kind of moods, I guess, entailed. And so that by the time you kind of meet them when she's like 21 and she's gone to college, like a lot of their relationship is quite like transactional in the sense that he kind of gives her an allowance when she's in college, and when she comes back home she'll go and visit him and clean his dishes and watch telly with him, but it's very like, it's almost like a traditional relationship in the fact that her mum's like, he's your dad, you go see him, like maintain that relationship. but she's at that age where she's kind of challenging those things a little bit and kind of saying, what, like, actually, what is this, and what are either of us getting from this dynamic? And I think, like, it's just really moving, I found, because I guess there's so much scar tissue and so much damage that I guess happened when she was younger, that they're trying to, I guess, like, patch all of that over and kind of be almost civil. And whilst of course there's so much pain and love for each other, like, they don't know how to get past that or communicate that. And I think that's such a recognizable dynamic with parents, whether they're, you know, struggling with anything or not. Family dynamics are so difficult, and so yeah, that was one that felt really kind of definitely massive to me when I was playing her the whole time, and made a lot of sense of her behavior to me, actually, was that relationship with her dad. And I really liked how in the end you kind of see her grow up a little bit and kind of decide, you know, as much as I resent the past that we had, or the things that happened between us, and she learns a lot of this through her mum as well, is actually, I love you amidst all of this, and I just want you to be okay. And so she kind of welcomes him back in her life, in a sense.
I think it's such a gorgeous kind of representation of two people who are feeling so much but just can't express it.
Yeah.
And I just think you both did such a gorgeous job in those scenes. So because of the nature of the podcast, I usually ask my guests I don't like to say favorite film, because I hate that question, but just if there has been a film in your life that has made an impact in your life, you know, or on you, or an influence in any sort of way, something like one that you'll always remember, kind of thing, or maybe one that you'll always revisit. And then also, if you have a favorite Irish film, and you can say this now openly because we were chatting about a TV show, so you don't have to be politically correct at all.
It's such a hard question because there's so many things. I watched Worst Person in the World, and I had COVID at the time, so I was feeling a little bit glum about life. And I honestly felt like, well, first of all, I think the lead actress, Renata, is that her name? She is honestly like the embodiment of, like, it's just like a complete appetite for life. Like, she just, the way that that character, like, totally just like grabs onto life and all of the different experiences that it can offer and all of the different things that it brings, like both joy and pain. It was one of those films that I watched and I honestly felt like like the life that she was bringing to that film was literally being like passed into me. Like, I was so inspired by it. So it made me so excited and so moved at all of the different things that she was feeling and going through, and like I was just completely glued. And
it's a beautiful film.
Everything about it, like just the experience of like life place as well, and how you imagine a certain life for yourself, and if a person who you're with wants that to go in a different direction, like how you accommodate other people in your kind of life path, and the decisions that you have to make, whether you want to follow the feelings that you have or you want to kind of hold on to the things that you know what works. And I think anything that just feels really kind of real or grounded, I'm so drawn to. And so I ended up then going to see that movie another 2 times in the cinema. And each time I got something different from it.
Yeah.
And like every time I cried, and I just think it's like an instant classic or something. Like
I think to see a story of just women that age and going against the grain, and you know, and it being okay, and yeah, it really is. It's gorgeous. I'm with you there on that one. That is a really gorgeous choice. And as a female actor as well, it's just like, it's just done so well. You're just in such safe hands with her. She's fab.
Yeah, and that director as well is just unbelievable. Like it really is a very, very special film. So that's kind of, I'll probably watch it again like next week, honestly.
I'll join you. Well, Alison, thank you so much for coming on to chat to me. And for any silly people out there who haven't binged watched Conversation with Friends like I did, you can catch it on BBC iPlayer, and I think it's in kind of real time on RTE as well. You can also catch it on the RTE iPlayer. And here at Irish Film London, we wish you all the best with all of your future successes, and we can't wait to see all of the wonderful things that you're going to do, and I'm sure we'll be having you back on again to chat very soon. So thanks so much for coming on to talk to me.
Thank you so much, Niamh. This was so lovely.
Thanks. Bye. And that's it for this week's interview. Thank you all so much for listening. We hope you really enjoyed it. Thank you to Culture Ireland and the Irish Emigrant Support Programme. Myself and Gerry will be back in a fortnight with a brand new interview. See you then.